I'm Pastor Matt Mitchell, and it is my privilege to pay tribute to one special lady who was my ninth grade English teacher. I knew her as Mrs. Russell. Mrs. Russell had a great sense of humor, an infectious laugh, a bright red head of hair, and a winsome and attractive way of conducting her class. She knew how to bring the best out of her English students, of which I was glad that I was one. Mrs. Russell taught us about parts of speech like verbs and nouns and gerunds and adjectives, and made us read stories like The Lottery and plays by William Shakespeare, and write our own stories. In many ways, she taught me a love for English. But English wasn't the only thing I learned from Mrs. Russell. I also learned that a teacher and a student could be friends, too. Many days after the bell had rung and school was over, I stopped by Mrs. Russell's room. My locker was just down the hall from her room, and after stuffing my things in my locker, we'd talk, sometimes for half an hour. She never stopped being a teacher or my elder during those discussions, and I never stopped being a student or respecting her. But during those discussions, we didn't just talk about English. We talked about life and about choices and about Jesus Christ. You see, Mrs. Russell was a Christian. And though you didn't hear about it every day in class, it affected everything that she did and said. And after school hours, we could talk about how her faith and my faith in Jesus made a difference in how we lived. I visited her classroom, and we had these discussions long after my ninth grade year. In fact, after Heather and I got engaged, one of the people I wanted her to meet before we married was Mrs. Russell. One of the most poignant lessons I learned from Mrs. Russell was how to go through tough times. It was during that year I had her for English that her husband, Mr. Terry Russell, died. He had some disease in an internal organ that was a constant uphill battle for their family. Mrs. Russell missed a lot of school that year, taking him to different doctor's appointments and dealing with the painful truth. We had a lot of substitutes for ninth grade English. But Mrs. Russell didn't fall apart. She was obviously going through something incredibly painful. Some subjects in our class and in our discussions would bring tears to her eyes. But even though she was in pain, and she didn't deny that, it was obvious to some of us that she had something or someone who was getting her through her trials and suffering, even with joy. It was also obvious that that something or someone was the Lord Jesus Christ. I've never talked with her about it, but her example of persevering in faith, even through adversity, was a great example for me. And now I'm a pastor and an author, and I know that the Lord used Mrs. Russell to help shape me into the person I am today. She was one special lady.